Most Americans remember 2008 as a time of chaos. Banks collapsed, millions lost their homes, retirement accounts were wiped out. And all of it stemmed from a financial system built on greed, risk, and a total lack of accountability. Now, nearly 2 decades later, another crisis is quietly brewing. This time, it's not the banks or mortgage lenders. It's private equity. And the warning signs are eerily familiar. Private equity firms aren't new. They've been around for decades. But in recent years, their influence has exploded. These firms buy up struggling businesses using huge amounts of borrowed money, make rapid cost-cutting changes to boost short-term profits, then sell those businesses for a quick gain. On paper, it's smart capitalism. In practice, it's a house of cards, and it's starting to shake. Take a look at what private equity is doing to everyday industries. Nursing homes, retail stores, media companies, even emergency services, they've all been swallowed by these investment giants. The results are devastating. When private equity takes over a nursing home, for example, the first thing to go is staffing fewer nurses, less training, lower quality care. And that's not a theory. It's been linked to higher mortality rates in facilities owned by private equity. The same pattern plays out in retail. Remember Toys R Us? That company wasn't destroyed by market forces. It was gutted by private equity, loaded with debt, drained of cash, and pushed into bankruptcy, all while the firms behind the scenes walked away with millions. It's a scorched earth strategy where the investors win and everyone else, employees, customers, communities, lose. But here's where it gets really dangerous. Private equity doesn't just ruin companies. It's now so large, so interconnected that it could pose systemic risks to the entire economy, just like the subprime mortgage market did in 2008. The big firms, Blackstone, KKR, Apollo, manage trillions of dollars. That's more than the GDP of most countries. And yet they operate in near total secrecy, outside the scrutiny that banks and public companies face. Because most of their operations are private, these firms aren't required to disclose the true level of risk they're carrying. And with interest rates rising, the debt they use to buy companies is becoming more expensive and harder to repay. If even a fraction of their portfolio companies default, we're not just talking about individual bankruptcies. We're talking about ripple effects across supply chains, local economies, pension funds, and yes, even your 401k. That's right, many public pension systems, teachers, firefighters, municipal workers, are now heavily invested in private equity funds. Why? Because they were promised high returns. But what they weren't told is how illiquid, risky, and opaque those investments really are. If the private equity bubble bursts, retirees could be the first to suffer again. And let's talk about housing. In the wake of the 2008 crisis, private equity firms began buying up foreclosed homes en masse. Now they're major players in the single-family rental market. That means your landlord might not be a person, it might be a billion-dollar investment firm. And they're not buying homes to help families, they're doing it to generate cash flow and asset appreciation. That's one reason why buying a home today feels impossible for so many Americans. The competition isn't fair, it's stacked. So how is this allowed to happen? Simple regulation hasn't kept up. Private equity firms don't face the same scrutiny as traditional financial institutions. They've lobbied hard to keep it that way. While the public was focused on big tech and Wall Street banks, private equity slipped under the radar, consolidating power behind closed doors. There's no real-time oversight, no stress testing, no accountability when things go wrong. If they fail, they don't just fail quietly, they take parts of the economy down with them. This isn't just a financial story. It's a political one. Many of the same lawmakers who claim to fight for the working class are backed by donors from the private equity world. The result? Loopholes like the carried interest tax rule, which allows these firms to pay lower tax rates than teachers and truck drivers. That's not an oversight, it's a rigged system, and yet most Americans don't even know what private equity is, let alone how much control it has over their lives. That's part of the strategy. By operating in the shadows, these firms avoid the kind of public backlash that banks faced after 2008. But the warning signs are flashing red. Highly leveraged companies, overstretched credit, aggressive asset stripping, widespread layoffs. It's the same pattern we saw before the last crash, only this time it's more spread out, more complex, and harder to unwind. The solution isn't simple, but it starts with awareness. We need transparency, oversight, limits on leverage, better protections for workers, renters, and retirees. And we need to ask ourselves, are we going to wait for another crisis before we act? Or are we going to learn from the past? Because if we don't, the next crash won't come from Wall Street. It'll come from the boardrooms of private equity, and by then it might be too late.